Shema Israel. I hope you enjoy this next study. My name's Dee. This is my wife, Millie.
So if you like what you see, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you wish to reach out to us, you can email us at devotedtoyah@gmail.com.
D-Rail, something you want to say on that point?
I just wanted to read Matthew 24:13 and 14.
Please do.
But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. And this good news of the reign shall be proclaimed in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
What's the news? What news, right? There's more. Yahusha, the Messiah, came for his lost sheep of Israel. He came for his own people first, so that non-Israelites can join in and be part of his people, so they can be part of Israel. That's always been the theme all throughout scripture. Gentiles were always allowed to join Israel and worship their God. That's the same theme. It's just a different solution. It's the same problem, sin. Sin is the issue. Lawlessness is the issue. The solution was a contrite, broken and contrite heart, along with offerings and sacrifices, okay? The solution changed. God became man. Yahuwah became a man and died for his people Israel. The solution changed. But the purpose and the instructions and the standard did not. Anyway, Milo.
Yeah, I want to bring up this point, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. Going back to one of the verses that was up there, which is Revelation. You don't have to go there. Okay. Revelation 18:4, and it says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, 'Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins, and lest you receive of her plagues.'" There's this. You're mentioning this idea of what's called cultural assimilation, and I just want to read part of a definition from, let's see, online. It says cultural assimilation is a process in which a minority group, okay, or remnant group or culture comes to resemble a society's majority group or assume the values, behaviors, and beliefs of another group. A conceptualization describes cultural assimilation as similar to acculturation, while another merely considers the former as one of the latter phases. Throughout history, there have been different forms of cultural assimilation. Examples of this type would be when we look in America, we call America the great melting pot. Why? Because everything just becomes this hodgepodge of different cultures. And to some extent for us, it's a good thing because we've been able to express our views freely. As you know, eventually that will stop, right? However, at the same time, even Brother Cedric, I think, brought this up last week or the week before, there's a negative to it because there is this natural inclination to assimilate to what we see the majority wind up doing. And Revelations, to me, I think shows the natural heart of man saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins." It is very difficult, not impossible, but difficult for a remnant, a minority, not to be engulfed in a majority. And I think this is why we see on the natural level Yahuwah taking his people out of Egypt. I mean, he was birthing a nation, literally, so they were able to grow in that manner. But there is still this difference between their gods and the God that we serve, which is only one true God. And later on, we wind up seeing continuously Yahuwah uses the phrases and reminds them constantly throughout decades and decades and generations, "I am the one that took you out of Egypt." Like he goes back. I mean, this generation, he could be talking to prophets later, kings later on, and he still says, "I am the one that took you out of Egypt." And why? I think it's because he's trying to remind us, do not go back into that cultural assimilation mindset. I took you out for a reason. There was a purpose. I had to grow my people, whatever it was, in that type of culture, that environment. But I did not want you to stay there. I do not want you to stay there. And you're not supposed to stay there. So it's very important. And for us, no matter where we are, no matter who listens to this message, whatever state, nation you're in, to not assimilate so much lest we partake in the sins of the majority and we lose our actual, which has been lost in many cases, the people that we are supposed to be. And this is why there always has been a remnant, and there always will be a remnant, because it's difficult not to melt, to mix and melt with the majority.
Yeah, go ahead, D-Bro. Oh, Ezzy, and then D-Bro.
I'm still gathering some points. D-Ro can go.
Okay, D-Bro.
Okay, I was going to quote Paul. A lot of Christians like to quote Paul, going back to pretty much what you're saying, and also what Brother D is saying about it's a chosen people, of a certain race or whatever. And this is in Acts 13, 16, and 17, where Paul says, and Shaul, standing up and motioning with his hand, said, Men, Israelis, or another translation says, brothers, and those fearing Elohim, listen. So he's saying those fearing Elohim might be talking about Gentiles. Then he says, the Elohim of this people, Israel, did choose our fathers and exalted the people in their sojourning in the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt. And with a high arm, he brought them out of it. Even Paul says this.
Of this people, the God of this people.
This people is what? Israel.
Wow. And I used to, as a Christian, I never made that connection. I never made the connection that the God I serve is the God of Israel. And if I did mention it, it went right over my head. Maybe it was a worship song. It was part of the lyrics in a worship song we would sing, but it would just go right over my head. I would never connect myself with Israel. I wasn't connecting myself with Israel, the cultural people. No, there was a disconnect. I'm a Christian. I'm a different religion. I'm a, different people, And, but today I absolutely feel differently. I try to conform my life more, and I'm still learning a lot, but I try to conform my life to the culture that I see in scripture. I don't care if it's 2020. Yahuwah's laws and instructions don't go out. They don't expire, until heaven and earth pass away.
Also wanted to point out too that Paul, when he said this, he was in the synagogue. So that shows you that the Gentiles were starting to learn the ways of the Israelis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, sir, D-Rel. Another connection as a Christian that it never connected with me.
And this is after
I'm thinking those Gentiles, Paul came to deliver them from the synagogues and to get them out of those places, so they could stop being defiled and learn this new way, That's my mentality until
it was on the Shabbat.
Yeah, they were keeping the Sabbath, but Paul rescued them from that. Paul rescued them from that bondage to have to keep the Sabbath day. No, this is absolute heresy. It's ridiculous teaching that comes from the Christian churches. There is a remnant of Christians who actually embrace the law of Moses, and it's starting to happen more. Ezzy, you good to go?
Yeah. I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying about it being an ethnic, there being ethnic ties, and how some people would see it as being racist, or that it is racist.
I didn't know how to phrase it. I just came up with it literally this morning. I was like, babe, this is an ethnic book. I don't know if that's even the correct thing to say, but you get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. So I just want to bring a little context to it, because I agree to some extent, because I think it has to do with the people, but I think it has a lot to do with the land, because if you take it back to Genesis, it talks about the Sabbath being created for man, not man being created for the Sabbath. In the same way, there's obviously a purpose to this land and where Yahuwah decided to make his covenant. Because if you take it to Genesis 2, I'm just going to read a couple of verses starting from 10 to 13. It says, and a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it divided and became 4 riverheads. The name of the first is Pishon. It is the one surrounding the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of the land is good. Bdellium is there, and the Shoam stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. it is the one surrounding the entire land of Kush. So geographically, Kush, is another name for Africa. Ethiopia is another name for Africa. Egypt is a large land in Africa. So even though we don't know the exact location of where Eden is, where he established his people was in the continent of Africa somewhere. And we know geographically that it's a very rich continent. There's gold, there's diamonds, there's oil, there's all of these rich resources. So when you think of Yahuwah making a covenant in a place, it's not going to be a place that's desolate. It's going to be a place that is rich in resources, that is providing, that is overflowing with abundance.
Milk and
So
honey.
That makes sense to me. It makes sense.
So not only is he making a covenant with the people, he also has a covenant. Go ahead. What you go
No,
ahead.
I'm just saying, unless Yahuwah makes the land desolate, but
exactly
in the core essence of what you're saying, it makes sense to me. I would like to think that the place is flourishing with good things.
Exactly. So when he brings up a people, he is going to bring up a people from that land where he has already established the Sabbath. He's already established Eden. It's already established there. Then you place man there. So the place where he chose I think it has more significance, the place of where he chose, not just the people, because the people came after the land was already chosen. Now, if you're going to dwell in a place where Yahuwah has decided to dwell, you're going to have to adhere to certain rules and regulations. It's just like being in any other country. If you go to a land, you got to obey their rules. So I just wanted to bring that aspect out, that it's not just the people. He also makes a covenant with the land. And one of the
Ezra, the Garden of Eden, are you talking about the Garden of Eden? Or you're talking about later, right? The promised land.
Right.
But the same principle of what you're saying is true even with Genesis 1 and 2. He created the land and the garden first, and then he put the man in it. Right.
And that's what I'm saying.
That's very interesting.
Even though, so he has a covenant with the land as well. So in Leviticus 26:42, I guess I can read to 45. It says, "Then I shall remember my covenant with Jacob, and also my covenant with Isaac, and also remember my covenant with Abraham, and remember the land. For the land was abandoned by them and enjoying its rest, or its Shabbat, while lying waste without them, and they were paying for their wickedness, because they rejected my right rulings, and because their being loathed my laws. And yet for all this, when they are in the land of their enemies, I shall not reject them, nor shall I loathe them, so as to destroy them and break my covenant with them, for I am Yahuwah, their Elohim. Then I shall remember for their sake the covenant of the ancestors whom I brought out of the land of Mitzrayim before the eyes of the nations, to be their Elohim. I am Yahuwah." So not only did he already
say that he's not gonna he won't reject them as they're in another land?
Yes, he won't reject them because of the covenant.
That's very interesting, because John MacArthur says that he did reject them when Jesus Christ died on the cross and resurrected. His final rejection of Israel.
Well, you just have to read your Bible for yourself.
Yeah, you got to read the Bible. You got to read the scriptures. Can't go by these false preachers.
But all in all, the point I'm trying to make is just not that it's an ethnic people. It also has a lot to do with the land that Yahuwah chose. He chose his people, and he chose the land that he wanted, his presence to be known, and he wanted to dwell in. So
he couldn't do it in Egypt. That's for sure. He had a specific place.